Hi, and welcome to episode 14 of the Air Hug Community Podcast. You're listening to the Air Hug Community Podcast. I'm your host, Judy, and on this podcast, I bring you conversations and stories from guests and myself that inspire us to thrive on a higher level. We talk about things like relationships and habits for optimal health and how we see the world. Whether you are a mother or an other, the Air Hug community is here to help you realize that improving the lives of others will boomerang back to you exponentially. And remember, not to be too serious. Life is better with a daily dose of smiles and air hugs. Mothers and others, we are going to have a chat today. It's all about, amongst other things, what happens when you put all your motherhood eggs in one basket and then at one point in time, your children leave the nest. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Air Hug Community Podcast. Today, we have a guest who I'm super excited to chat with. So her name is Maria Olsen, and she has gone through a very interesting transformation. And I was drawn to her by the book that she wrote called 50 After 50. And so rather than just talk about her anymore, I'm just going to bring you right on and ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself today.
Thank you so much, Judy, for having me on your podcast. I am a fan, of course. And my book, 50 After 50, is what I'd like to call a proscriptive memoir, in that the first third is about what brought me to the point at age 50 to try 50 new things in my 50th year. And then the second 2/3 of the book is about all of those things I tried. And I broke them into 7 loose categories that included spiritual endeavors, thrill-seeking ventures, learning and teaching, social activities, lifestyle changes. I'm forgetting the others right now, of course, since I'm on air, but in any event, I tried 50 new things because I, in my 50th year, got sober from alcoholism, got divorced, and became an empty nester. And I had to change everything about my life. And I didn't know where to start. So I started making a list of all these things I'd like to try and things I'd like to change about my life. And it helped me to determine the contours of how I wanted my next chapter in life to look. And I think that we are living in a time, our generation, where we can have it all, but maybe not all at the same time. And at age 50, many of us are empty nesters. We maybe are lucky enough to have financial security, to feel good about who we are, to feel comfortable in our own skin. And it's before real physical decline sets in for many of us. We can still walk and hike and travel. And it hopefully is before our parents start needing our care full-time or even part-time. And so it's this sweet spot in life for many people. And reaching the half-century mark is a time of reckoning for most people. So I wasn't going to write a book. I didn't set out to write a book. But people started hearing about my project and wanted the list. And I realized that I had really hit a point of resonance with a lot of people. So I found an agent and wrote a book and used the book as a vehicle for helping primarily women, but helping people reinvigorate the next chapter of their life, wherever they happen to be. Some people in their 20s are happy with the book because I saved them from a lot of mistakes, and they start to think more in long term. And I have been thrilled to turn a lot of trauma in my life into a force for good for people. Like I am someone who was sexually assaulted, and I help young women who have been sexually assaulted. And I am recovering from alcoholism. I have 8 years sober, and I help a lot of people in recovery from all kinds of addictions. And divorce can be a really tough thing for people. So I help them with that and the transition to being an empty nester.
Yeah.
And dating in your 50s. Weird, weird, weird. Especially if you've been with the same person for 25 years. So I had a big explosion in my life of changes, and I found a way that worked for me to work through those changes and supply really helpful information to other people embarking on a new chapter.
That is something. So I have to tell you, you answered my question before I asked it, which is awesome. It's like we're in sync here, because I wanted to know what inspired you to write about your 50 after 50. And what I didn't realize when I was reading the book, or maybe I didn't notice it, I listened on Audible, by the way, which I found, I don't know, very soothing. But I didn't realize that all of those things happened, all of those life-changing events happened in your 50th year.
Yeah.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah, and I guess one other reason I wrote the book is I journal a great deal, and I find journaling therapeutic and a way to help me process feelings. So the whole exercise was cathartic while I was doing it. And then once it was published, I was a little bit nervous because it is so personal.
It
I
sure
mean,
is.
I bled all over those pages and made public things that I had a lot of shame around. So it was quite an exercise for me.
Yeah, the whole biracial thing. And one very vulnerable moment really stood out to me. And you talked about your first communion wearing not white,
Yeah,
right? And how that to this day you still kind of cringe when you look at those pictures.
I do. I do. My mom was an immigrant and she was a working mother, and she didn't know that that was the way it was done, I guess. And I was so embarrassed, and I still hurt. My heart hurts for that little girl
Yeah.
who really stood out and didn't want to at all.
And had to go through with walking down the aisle and doing that whole thing. I can
Oh,
just
yeah.
imagine.
It
Wow. Oh,
was painful.
well, speaking of children, I know you talk a lot, especially when you journal and do your gratitude every day. You're very grateful for your children, and they have always been your number one priority. But yet, at some point, the identity of being super mom and so needed kind of became an issue, correct?
Absolutely. I put all my eggs in the motherhood basket, knowing that that was not the right thing to do. I feel like I lost my identity, my individuality aside from being a mom. I put everything I could into it. And part of that was because I felt like my childhood had been really not what I wanted or deserved. And I wanted to give my kids everything I thought I had lost out on. And then when they started pushing me away, as they're supposed to
To
do,
do, yeah.
I took it personally and had a really tough time and found refuge in wine and just drank myself into oblivion most days. And it was not good.
Oh,
So I needed to find myself again. And I went to therapy, and the therapist asked me, "What brings you joy?" And aside from my children, I couldn't think of a single thing. And that is, to me, just shocking right now, especially that
and you had a career, correct?
I had a successful career in the law and had been a political appointee in the Clinton Justice Department. And then when I had kids, I gave it all up willingly. But I forgot to keep some part of me just for me. I forgot about it
Mm.
and poured myself into being a great mom. And I don't regret it. I do believe that I would have benefited from keeping some individual interests more alive. So,
Yeah, that's something. And I do see a lot of women doing that. And being a mother myself of grown children, I kind of didn't do that. I mean, my kids were always number one. My husband was always number one, and then kids. And I've always told them that. And that's something that my mother always told me. And I didn't quite get it, being a selfish little kid. I'm like, wait, what do you mean I'm not number one? Dad's number one? We're number two? Oh. But also, I did keep my own interests. Maybe had to put them on the back burner for a few years, but I always knew there would be like this fitness business that I have and in this online boutique. I always knew there would be something, and I'm pretty grateful to have had the insight for that.
that was very smart, very smart. And I didn't know that husband or spouse was supposed to be number one. He was number four after the dog. I mean,
Oh, wow.
I had no time for him, and our marriage absolutely suffered. So
Well,
your mom gave you some good advice.
my mother, in many, many ways, was ahead of her time. And she was a child of immigrant parents, but and a devout Catholic, but she was very probably liberal in her own way. She believed that everybody loved the same God, and I don't have to get too much into religion, but she believed that it's all the same God, whether you are, whatever you believe, whatever your higher power is. She called it God because she couldn't imagine calling it anything else, but she believed that everyone's spiritual guide or higher power was all the same being. It's just the way that we looked at it. And she, the whole thing with your husband comes first, and that's the way it is. And she let us know that pretty much regularly, and it wasn't, I think she wanted to prepare us to be good spouses, or at least sensitive spouses.
Yeah, well, that was really, really important. I wish I had had that advice too.
So, well, I guess I was pretty lucky. I will say that.
Yeah.
So you made such a transition in your 50th year. I mean, the kids leave, you decide to get sober. So you had a drinking issue before that, but you decide to get sober and you ended your marriage all at the same time. During that transition, what scared you the most?
Oh gosh. Wow, that is such a good question that no one has asked me.
Really?
I have been on so many interviewed countless times and no one's asked me that question. Wow. Um gosh,
I
I
mean, the whole
think
thing sounds scary to me.
yeah, it was scary. And I think that being so busy with trying new things, and I kept the list kind of organic in that I would add things and take things away. And I was so doing instead of being that perhaps that staved off some of the fear of not knowing what the chapter was going to look like. I imagine financial insecurity would be one of the top fears. I had to go back to practicing law to take care of myself. I didn't ask for alimony because I felt so guilty about my alcoholism and breaking up our marriage.
Mm,
So I just wanted a promise from my ex-husband that he would take care of the kids' needs financially, which he does.
mm-hmm.
But for myself, I felt that it was up to me to do that. And so I went back to practicing law. I took the Maryland bar exam, which made me feel good about myself, that I could still, I didn't have mommy brain. I was still smart.
Yeah. And how many years was that you had not worked and you went back and
15.
oh my gosh, after 15 years
15 years.
wow.
Yeah. I had done a little,
Congratulations.
thank you. I did a little pro bono work here and there, and then I got back into litigation slowly. And I was lucky enough to find part-time litigation jobs supporting essentially solo practitioners in their litigation work.
Mhm.
And I knew I was a good writer. I didn't know how good I would be in the courtroom after such a big break. So I started out writing primarily briefs and motions and supporting my bosses in that way. And so that worked. And really, the practice of law hadn't changed that much. The biggest thing was a lot more was done electronically. And that was an adjustment, but not too bad. And I I feel like having that income helped me not be too scared. And I also am lucky that I have a good family network. I had a good model in my mother of someone who was independently financially secure. And I knew that she would help me if the bottom fell out. And luckily I didn't need it. So I felt
Well,
good
what a
about
good
that.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that as someone who had been raped, I am also very hyper vigilant when I'm by myself and not living with a man. I had an alarm system put in and maybe was scared at night sometimes or walking alone in ways I hadn't been before I got divorced.
Hmm.
And it would be scary to go on a date. I would always tell someone where I was going and try to check out the other person as thoroughly as I could beforehand. So that was a little bit scary. But on a lighter note, one of the things that I did in my 50 after 50 that I did for the purpose of stretching my comfort zone was I am a terrible singer, but I've always wanted to know what it felt like to sing on stage. So I went to an open mic night where I didn't know anybody. And I got up on stage and I belted out a song. I was terrible. Left the stage to one applause. And we'll never do it again.
But you did it.
But I
Wow.
did it. And I was scared. And I did it anyway. So I lived the slogan that courage is not the absence of fear, but walking through that fear. And so I know that I can do it now. I learned how to live with discomfort or to experience discomfort and do something anyway.
Okay, wait a minute. We're going to have to pause here because we need to really think about that. If people listening, you just have to listen to this again. So can you repeat that? Courage is not the absence of fear.
But it is moving through something despite the fear.
Wow.
It's a famous quote. I forgot who the author of that quote is.
We'll have to look it
Someone
up.
very esteemed, like Winston Churchill or something.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Wow, that just struck me like you're afraid and you do it anyway. You just do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a lesson that you kind of have to live through before you can actually believe it.
Yeah, I
Because,
think we hear a lot about people being afraid to do something, but just do it. If you're afraid, that's a good sign. Do it anyway, kind of thing. But
yeah. And it's a lesson that we try to instill in our children that they should stretch themselves. But it's a hard one because fear is also something instilled in us so that we don't die, that we have healthy
yeah,
fear of going too fast or not wearing a seatbelt because we know from experience or from learning that certain things will kill us. So it's good to have a certain amount of fear.
yeah, it's the difference between being reckless, right? Would be, a healthy fear would be avoiding us from be doing something too reckless or physically or life
Correct.
harming. I guess life
Correct.
harming, risky. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, that's true. And we have to teach our kids when they're little to not cross the street. And there is healthy fear there.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So interesting because some of these issues we talk about, like I was thinking, I had an episode on stress, how stress is not always bad. There's a little bit of healthy stress that we can have, but not the chronic kind of stress that eats away at us, and
Oh, so true. So true. And along the lines of that topic, one of the lifestyle changes is I stopped saying yes to everything. I stopped being a people pleaser as much as I could. I stopped doing things that I didn't really do, but I felt didn't really want to do, but felt obligated to do.
mm,
So now I ask myself questions like, is this something that is moving me towards who I want to be? Is this something that is unnecessarily depleting me? And more often than not, I'll decline and say, oh, I have another commitment. And that commitment can be just to replenishing my energy reserves or putting my feet up and relaxing.
yeah, which is so important, and right, we don't have to be yes people all the time.
And I think that that's a gift of aging, that we care less about what other people think and realize that something that feels so big right now, we won't even remember in 5 years.
Yeah. It's funny, I talked to my husband about that quite a bit, and he's pretty good about his boundaries and drawing the lines, and no, I'm not going to fit in one more whatever it is, if it's going to rob me, of peace, or if it's going to rob me of time that I can't get back. He's been really helpful in that way.
Yeah. And an epiphany that I had in midlife is that many of us are so careful about how we spend our money and not so careful about how we spend our time. And yet time is the one thing none of us can buy or manufacture or get more of if we waste it. So I've completely turned that notion on its head, that my time is really valuable for me because I don't know when it's going to end.
Boy, right? And as the years go by, we think of that more and more and more, right?
Yes.
It's
So
it's become more and more realistic, especially, I'm midlife as you are, and I see people not living as well as they can, or just thinking they're done with being healthy, and it's just, and then there's those people that drop dead, and I'm like, yikes.
yeah. And being in the fitness area that you're in, you see how being a healthy person can extend your life and increase the quality of your life.
Yeah, the big thing is to have your quality of daily living be right where you want it to be. You could live to be whatever number you think is like a great number, 95 or 100 or whatever it is. But which I watched my father decline. His last 10 years were just very sad, very, he couldn't move, and the thing, and again, my husband and I always say this, and he's in healthcare as well. We both always say this to each other, and we reminisce, and we're like, listen, the goal here is to live well for as long as we can and then die fast,
Mm-hmm.
go to sleep and be done. But let's, and I always think of Jack LaLanne. He made it to 93 and he had a very high quality of life. So I'm like, go Jack LaLanne. That's my idol.
I also think about George Burns, who said that he got a massage every day of his life.
No way.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, well, I assume it's true, but I think that's so interesting because touch is so important and you don't realize it. Well, there are studies that babies who aren't touched fail to thrive.
Yes.
So it makes sense as adults that we too can suffer if we have no sense of touch in our lives.
Yeah. Hugging is,
Yeah.
gosh, where did I read this? I don't remember, but I do remember the whole topic of hugging and even hugging therapy. And the author who wrote this, it was like a little essay or an article, something, was challenged to do like 30-second hugs like 4 times a day. And 30 seconds is longer than what you think. You hug someone goodbye, it's like, 2 seconds maybe. 30 seconds is a long time to do 4 times a day.
Oh my gosh, that's so true.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So, well, I did say that we would go wherever we went with this conversation, and we're going, but you wrote about this retreat that you went on, and correct me if I'm wrong, it involved deaf people?
Yes. I go every year on something called Women of the Wild, and you can read about it at womenofthewild.us. And it is a female retreat, and it's typically now it's in West Virginia. It used to be in Virginia for a while, but it's a weekend retreat, and it's all about spirituality, nature, self-care. And many of the women who attend the retreat come from Gallaudet University. So there are sign language interpreters at every part of at meals, at the workshops, everything.
Okay.
And it was so eye-opening to me to learn more about deaf culture and manners even. Like, do you look at the interpreter or do you look at the person to whom you're speaking when that person is deaf? Well, you look at the person to whom you're speaking, because many times reading your lips is very helpful.
Okay.
And having rooms set up so that everyone can see the interpreter is very important. Lots of things that we take for granted as hearing people. And it also is an exercise in gratitude for me, because I have the use of my senses. Yeah. And we take so much for granted often if we don't take the time to feel gratitude for all the many blessings that we have. And so having a daily gratitude exercise is an important part of my emotional well-being. I every day think of things for which I'm grateful and write them down. And having a gratitude journal has really lifted me out of depression. I am someone who has depression and anxiety. It's under control, but it hasn't always been. And learning how to be grateful really helps with that. In fact, with my significant other, I instituted this practice that he willingly goes along with. So I'm grateful for that. Mm-hmm. But every day we text each other something about the other person for which we are grateful. And it can be anything from the mundane to the profound. It can be, I love my ex today, or, his name is Bill mm-hmm. today, because he fixed the sink, or I love the little crinkles at the edges of his eyes when he laughs, or I love that he makes me feel appreciated. Anything,
yeah. But just the fact, there's something about writing things down, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
It makes it real. You could think it, plus if you don't share it, that's so nice that you share it with your significant other, because now you're both benefiting from it.
Yeah, and that which we focus on becomes enlarged in our lives. And if I looked at the things that irked me about him, because we're all human, so nobody is perfect, then those things would grow bigger. And I don't want to dwell on those things. I want to dwell on the things that I appreciate about him. And that really helps with adult children too. Mm-hmm. I focus on the things I love about my children rather than the things that I don't enjoy as much.
Yeah, well, it definitely makes it more pleasant. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Having adult children as well. I get all excited just thinking about them. Yeah. I want to ask you one more question. Well, maybe two, but you wrote about a long meditation. You were by the river. Was that on the retreat? Was that another? It was.
Yeah, that was on that same retreat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was excellent. I think about it a lot. is it the one about picturing people as trees
You talked about a phoenix.
rising? Oh, that meditation. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Meditation has become a huge part of my life, helping me to maintain a certain amount of serenity every day. And meditation does not have to be lengthy. For me, sometimes it involves taking deep breaths at a traffic light. Sometimes it's a walking meditation where I focus on my breath and my steps. And when I was on this retreat, I did a really long meditation by a river. And I sat there with my eyes closed and tried to empty my mind of any thoughts. And when thoughts entered my mind, I would figuratively put them on a boat and let them sail away. And at that time, I was going through my divorce. I was in early sobriety. And I had this image arise at the back of my eyelids of a phoenix rising out of the ashes and my life starting over, and how I was gaining strength from the trauma and the difficulties I had experienced. And I emerged from that deep, deep meditation so reinvigorated and so with such a sense of hope for the future, that I was indeed going to design my future on my own terms, and that I had the strength to design a future that was aligned with my values and with who I wanted to be, the best version, the very best version that I could be of myself. And it really was a touching off point for me to design the life that I have today, that I'm proud of. It's a life that aligns with my values, and I don't have secrets anymore. And I can hold my head up high and know that I am living in the light and in truth and focusing on things that are important to me. So I used to be all about how many friends I had and how many parties I went to. And now I am about the depth of my relationships and how are all the people in my life, people who elevate me and help me to be the best version of me that I can be. I am very intentional about how I spend my time and with whom I spend my time. And that has made a really great life for me. I'm really happy.
Wow. And 2020 obviously has been a challenge for most of us, but I think it's a time where a lot of us are realizing the same thing. It's not how many friends we have. It's, who can you call? And really, I think we've all hit our down points in this year,
Oh, yeah.
and definitely, I'm big on reminding people and calling, just getting on the phone and calling. And even if I just leave a message, hey, I want to check in, but I'm human too. And I'm like, if they don't call me back, I'm like, I hope it was just because they didn't see their message. But, and there are just fewer and fewer people, I think, that you let into your inner circle, but they earn their way in.
That is so true. I really like the way you put that. Yes.
Yeah.
So true. So true. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So tell me, what are you excited about these days?
What am I excited about? I am excited that today I learned that my son, Chris Olsen, was named the sexiest man alive by People magazine in the TikTok category.
Wait, what? Whoa.
You know how People magazine does that sexiest man alive stuff?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Well, they have a bunch of categories, and my son is a TikTok star.
Okay.
He has 4 million plus followers.
Wow.
And they named him sexiest man alive.
That's pretty cool. And that is very exciting.
Yeah.
When I ask this question, I never know what I'm going to get. But
that was a surprise, I bet.
It was a surprise. I don't even think I could dream that up. But congratulations. What is your son's name?
Chris Olsen.
Chris Olsen. Maybe I'm going to have to look him up because, if he's sexy, I might want to see.
Yeah, I'm really excited for him. But see, that again is something about my kids. What am I excited about for me is I'm working on my next book, and it is about the Pandora's box of DNA testing.
Oh.
I got a shock of my life when I did a 23andMe over-the-counter test.
Wait, tell us. Can you tell us?
I will. I'll give you a little preview. I found out that my father who raised me is not my biological father.
Oh my goodness.
I found that out at age 53. And I found out that my biological father is on television and in movies that I have watched my entire life and didn't know he was my father.
Is he alive?
He's alive. He has no children of his own, and we have a great relationship. He lives on the West Coast. I live on the East Coast, and I visited him 3 times, and we talk on the phone. Maybe it was every week. Now it's more like once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All from 23andMe?
All from 23andMe. So I'm collecting stories about other people who have had shocker stories, news come out of DNA test results. And you can find me on my website, which is Maria Leonard Olsen, OLSEN.com, or my email address and all of my social media is 50 after 50, FIFTYAFTER and the number 50. Or just Google me and you'll find me. And I'd love to hear your DNA test result stories because there are some crazy ones out there.
Wow. Okay. Well, this answers the question of where can we find you? And I will put all of this in the show notes.
Thanks.
MariaLeonardOlsen.com. And
Yes.
just stay on for a minute after we're done. I want to make sure I spell it right. And then 50after50.com. And you're also 50 after 50 on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. And Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Facebook and Twitter as well. Cool.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you. This has been a really cool chat, I think. Now I'm showing my age by saying the word cool, but it doesn't matter because I don't care if people know how old I am.
Exactly.
Yeah, but thank you so much. And by the way, people listening, I highly recommend this book, The 50 After 50. It's really inspiring and entertaining, and at some points you want to cry, at other points you're like, go Maria. So I want to thank you. This has been great. This has been a great chat. I'm thrilled.
Thank you so much. I am really grateful to be on your show.
All right, we'll talk soon. And speaking of being grateful, I am grateful that you took the time to listen today. And would you do me a huge favor? It would mean a lot to me. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and take a screenshot of this episode and share it on social media. There are so many nuggets of just light bulb moments here, especially for people in midlife. But even if you're not in midlife, you're going to get there someday. And this episode is just a goldmine of information.